Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I'd like to read an article that discusses how theft is becoming a larger issue for retailers in America. It says over here, thefts, always an issue for retailers, become more brazen. In recent months, robberies have been more visible, with several involving large groups rushing into stores and coming out with armloads of goods. Flash mobs swarmed through a Nordstrom in Northern California and two Best Buy stores in Minnesota, running out with armfuls of merchandise. 5 thieves steal $20,000 in products from an Ulta beauty store in Pennsylvania in just 40 seconds. A security guard is fatally shot in Oakland, California, while working with a local television news crew reporting about a recent retail robbery by a group of thieves. He is shot while talking about a robbery. Anyway, theft is an ever-present issue for retailers. As much as $68.9 billion in products were stolen from retailers in 2019. According to one industry group. But it has become more visible, brazen, and violent in recent months, forcing an industry already buffeted by pandemic lockdowns and fights over mass requirements to deal with a new problem. This level of violence has taken it to a whole new level, said Rachel Michelin, president of the California Retailers Association. No one has seen this before. Luxury retailers in Union Square in San Francisco, the site of several high-profile robberies this year, have boarded up windows to prevent more mayhem. Best Buy warned last week that theft was lowering profit margins and said it was using QR codes for checkout in some areas so employees did not need to unlock items right away. Home Depot has hardened its stores, putting power tools and other valuables out of reach and advising employees not to film robberies with their phones because it could escalate the situation. This is an interesting one. Don't film it because you may escalate and make it worse, but at the same time, if people are never held to task or held to account for what they do, if the greater society doesn't get to see this is a person that walked into a store and stole a bunch of stuff, it does kind of embolden them to continue doing it into the future. I don't know how I feel about taking away the aspect of societal shaming from people who are committing these type of acts that admittedly make shopping worse for everybody. When you go into a store and you feel like a thief because you want to buy a razor blade for your shaver, and you have to go through all of this ridiculous stuff because they can't have the items out because if they're out, they're stolen. You have to understand that part of why that's done is because of shit like this. It winds up making the shopping experience worse. Making the shopping experience worse in person means that there are less stores that will provide things in person, meaning that you're just kind of benefiting companies like Amazon and other online retailers, which is going to accelerate the shift towards there being less in-person stores you could buy this stuff. But and that's kind of frustrating because I miss the days where if I needed some basic trinket or something, I could get it now. Amazon Prime is cool. You know what's better than Amazon Prime? Making a 20-minute walk and getting what I need. It has become second nature to take out your phone and record something when that happens, says Scott Glenn, Vice President of Asset Protection at Home Depot. But these people are getting violent. Retail executives and security experts link the thefts to a confluence of factors, but primarily the ease with which thieves have been able to resell stolen goods on internet marketplaces like Amazon and Facebook. But even industry veterans who have been tracking generations of shoplifters have been stunned by the methods and mindset of the thieves, saying they reflect a sense of impunity. I imagine the idea that they won't get caught. Some recent robberies in which large groups rush into a store, overwhelm employees, and flee in cars before the police can respond recall the looting that occurred across the country amid the protests after the murder of George Floyd in May of 2020. At that time, people took advantage of police departments stretched by the protests and ransacked hundreds of stores, including the Macy's in Herald Square, and many smaller retailers, causing millions of dollars in damage. I appreciate that they point out that smaller retailers were also affected by this because a common talking point I remember last year was insurance will pay for it. Insurance will pay for it. Don't worry, it's just insurance. It's a large company. It's Nike. And what people don't understand is that, A, insurance often does not pay for it. I mean, just look at the argument that the owner of the World Trade Center buildings had to have with his insurance company as a multi-billionaire. Insurance never pays out without a fight. And if you're a small business, you are not going to be able to have that fight because your business is closed. You don't have any income. You don't have any assets anymore. And you can't afford to pay the lawyer to fight out the insurance company in court. So you're done. As tensions flared across the nation, major retailers like Nordstrom and Target would not discuss the extent of damage to their stores or how many they had to close during protests, instead of focusing on empathy for the demonstrators. The designer Marc Jacobs wrote on Instagram, "Never let them convince you that broken glass or property is violence," adding, "Property can be replaced. Human lives cannot." What a virtue signaling fucking cunt rag. It's very interesting when you hear people say things like this, when you just get an idea of what they're worth. Is this the person that owns the small Korean barbecue across the street from me that went out of business and was completely destroyed last year? What a virtue signaling piece of garbage. So let's just take a look at this for a moment. So there was a store that had put up a sign saying, we're already closed because of COVID, we're broke, please just don't break in our windows. That got their windows broken last year. Small Korean barbecue. Do you think that small Korean barbecue across the street from me is worth as much as Marc Jacobs? Let's take a look. So here it says Marc Jacobs is worth $200 million. Now, again, you cannot always trust these websites. These websites are often wrong. This website, Guessing My Net Worth, says that I have over 2 million subscribers on YouTube, when you literally just have to show up on my YouTube page to see that that's not true. This website over here says I'm worth 100,000, and then literally right under that says I'm worth $1 million. So again, the people writing these websites are not exactly using all their brain cells. But let's say that we assume they're wrong by a factor of 90%. Is that fair? Speculation. They're wrong by 90%. The guy's worth $20 million. Of course, it is a fuckface that is worth $20 million fucking dollars that is okay with this. If you're worth $20 million, of course you can replace your property. Of course you can replace your window. Of course you can replace everything because you're rich. You know who cannot replace their property? Small businesses that got brutalized when fuckfaces like you minimize the damage that was being done here. Because that's what's happening. You have people that were actually peacefully protesting. I walked through one of them last year. I recorded myself walking through it last year and uploaded it to my YouTube channel. And after it was done, I turned off the camera and I talked to a couple of the people that were there. That is separate from people that are using that as a pretext to ransack stores. And once you start virtue signaling and saying, well, it doesn't really matter, it's not that bad. Never let someone convince you that that's violence. Property can be replaced. Human lives cannot. You're emboldening the people that are not protesters, that are rioters, that are scammers, that are thieves. They are separate. And you cannot pretend that this is some sort of good thing. When you do that, you get more of it into the future. And of course, the people that make statements like this are people that are worth over $20 million that will easily be able to rebuild their stores, easily be able to fight the insurance company to get them to cover everything for free. They don't give a fuck about small businesses. They don't give a fuck about the small barbecue place. They don't give a fuck about the family-owned eyeglass shop that winds up going out of business. Because it doesn't matter to them. They care about looking good in the moment, and it is disgusting. There is no reason that you need to steal from a small family-owned business because a cop 2,000 miles away did stupid shit. This is not morality, and this makes no sense, and I don't reward it. If my mailman punches me in the face, so then I go and I punch Erica or Mr. Clinton in the face, it doesn't make sense. My problem is with the mailman. Why am I punching my cat? You have a problem with the police. Understandable. When you start destroying small businesses, and when Marc Jacobs is like, oh yeah, just it's not really that bad. Again, the man that's saying that is a man that can very easily fix the damage to his businesses. With the unrest subsided, retailers are less reluctant to talk publicly about theft. Yes, because last year, if you talked about it, you were told, why are you focusing on this instead of that? You know, the whole idea that you can't think that Derek Chauvin should get life in prison, while simultaneously, what the fuck are you breaking into a Korean barbecue place for? Again, I don't mind. I have the ability to multitask. I can do two things at once. You belong in prison. Hey, you're breaking into a barbecue for what? Okay, you should be in prison too. With the unrest subsided, retailers are less reluctant to talk publicly about theft. Looting in general started during civil unrest, and now it has evolved, says Ben Dugan, president of the Coalition of Law Enforcement in Retail, a trade group focused on crime at retailers. Criminal organizations saw during civil unrest that they were able to get their hands on millions of dollars of stolen product very quickly. Not just that, they saw that the CEOs of these organizations were turning a blind eye and it's not that bad. Again, that means you're going to get more of it. The rise in thefts comes as punishments for retail theft have been broadly eased over the past decade. Imagine that. A lower punishment for committing a crime leads to more people committing the crime. Who would have thought? Since 2005, 30 states have increased the dollar threshold for theft offenses, which effectively means that fewer people are going to jail for smaller thefts, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. More than half the states now have a felony theft threshold of $1,000 or more. And theft laws were changed to help reduce incarceration rates across the country, and some studies have found that the lower penalties have not led to more crime. I would like to figure out the methodology of those specific studies, and then how they came to their results, and then compare the study to the actual reality of the past year. And many of the most brazen crimes committed around Thanksgiving far exceeded the $1,000 threshold. Still, the thefts are being politicized, with some leaders saying they show the failure of decriminalization efforts. Others worry that the recent crimes could be used as a pretext to ratchet up penalties and incarceration rates again. I like how this is being phrased as a bad thing. Some industry experts say the problem is not necessarily the laws, but the lack of enforcement by the police and prosecutors, which emboldens enterprising thieves. A big priority, they say, should be breaking up the criminal organizations directing and profiting the most from the thefts. I'm open to that. I'm open to the idea that the laws being made more lax to reduce criminality may not be the issue. It may simply be the lack of enforcement of existing laws. And this is something that you'll hear from gun rights activists all the time, which is instead of adding new legislation, what if there's simply actual enforcement of existing legislation? And I'm open to that, and I think Oreo the cat is as well. I'm open to that as an idea. Ms. Michelin, the head of the California Retail Trade Group, has been meeting with local prosecutors in the governor's office, which has established a task force on organized retail crime, trying to raise the urgency of prosecuting these cases. The level of organized retail theft we are seeing is simply unacceptable, says Governor Gavin Newsom of California in a statement. Businesses and customers should feel safe while doing their holiday shopping. I wonder how much he was focused on this summer of last year. Mr. Dugan, who has worked with a slew of major retailers and pharmacy chains like Walgreens, said that often the people snatching items are paid small fees, like $500 for each robbery, which then feed larger enterprises that resell the goods online. Typically, these robberies don't involve large groups looting stores, but instead are smaller thefts that build over time. In one recent case, a 70-year-old man in Atlanta paid recovering drug addicts to steal razors and health products from stores like Target, CVS, and Publix to take them to his warehouse, according to court documents. By the way, if you're able to steal razors from Walgreens, you are one enterprising dick. That is hard. I mean, if you just see the amount of crap that they have, I would argue that the razor section of the pharmacy aisle at the store that I go to is better guarded than a medium security prison. That's interesting, that you're actually able to get anything from those stores. The man, Robert Whitley, then sold the items online through businesses called Closeout Express and Essential Daily Discounts. He sold more than 140,000 items on Amazon's marketplace, totaling $3.5 million, according to federal prosecutors. Mr. Whitley's lawyer said the thefts never involved violence. He said Mr. Whitley, who had struggled with drug addiction himself, ran support groups and provided shelter for others struggling with substance abuse. Mr. Whitley, who pleaded guilty to one count of interstate transportation of stolen property, was sentenced in October to nearly 6 years in federal prison. His daughter, Noni Whitley, who was accused of being part of the illegal operation, was sentenced to 5 years. Similar cases have occurred from Katy, Texas to Charlotte, North Carolina, and help explain why in many big box chains and drugstores around the country, items like teeth whitening strips and razor blades are increasingly being put behind lock and key. Stolen goods used to show up at flea markets and pawn shops, but now that has changed in recent years. One of the biggest issues is that brick-and-mortar retailers have been grappling with is the rapid growth of online marketplaces where anybody can easily sell goods, often anonymously. Amazon, eBay, Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, Etsy, all of those are utilized by illicit online sellers, and they're allowed to get away with it because the illicit sellers are allowed to operate with anonymity on the internet. Okay, how much anonymity do you get on eBay, Amazon? eBay, I don't know how much has changed, but I remember 10 years ago when I used eBay, they asked for my social security number. They asked for all of my information, address, and everything before I was able to actually sell anything or get money transferred to my bank account. They don't have to list their real name or address or location or their real banking information, so no one is concerned about being caught if they're not using their real name. Consumers are often unaware of the provenance of items they're buying, but issues can emerge with products like baby formula, which can be expired or otherwise compromised when stolen. The anonymity reflects yet another instance in which criminals, stymied by rules in the physical world, can operate freely on the internet, an issue that has surfaced in problems involving misinformation, questionable advertisements, and merchandise glorifying crimes. Pawn shops, for example, are regulated in almost every state, said Richard Rossman, a sergeant with the Broward County Sheriff's Office in Florida, who is also part of the Coalition of Law Enforcement and Retail. If you're going to sell an item to a pawn shop, the seller has to pledge that the property is his or hers, is not stolen, and the pawn shop documents the item appropriately on a state-regulated form, and we can hold the seller accountable and the pawn shop accountable, Sergeant Rossman said. There's no mechanism in place right now that requires the collection of that data on the online marketplaces. The coalition has gotten support from industry groups and retailers, including pharmacy chains, Home Depot, and Ulta Beauty, on bipartisan legislation known as the Informed Consumers Act. The bill would require online marketplaces to authenticate the identity of high-volume third-party sellers, including their bank account information and tax identification, and allow consumers to see basic identification and contact information for those sellers. The rule would apply to vendors who made 200 or more discrete sales in a year amounting to 5,000 or more. Etsy, OfferUp, and eBay said they supported legislation after opposing a draft that raised privacy and safety concerns for sellers, especially people selling small-scale items like a couch or people with craft businesses at home. Etsy noted that mass-produced items were not usually allowed on its marketplace, even if they were being sold legitimately. Meta, which owns Facebook Marketplace and The RealReal, which sells high-end secondhand goods, declined to comment on the legislation. Meta said that Facebook Marketplace users could report items that were stolen and that law enforcement could contact the company regarding stolen items. Amazon said in a statement that we regularly request invoices, purchase orders, or other proofs of sourcing when we have concerns about how a seller may have obtained particular products they want to sell. You can make that shit up in 5 minutes. You could literally make a purchase order up in 5 minutes. Google image search some fake company logo. No. It added that it employed 10,000 people working to prevent fraud and abuse in its site and supported the Informed Consumers Act. Several marketplaces said they shared product information with Leads Online, a database that law enforcement can use to search for specific items on their sites. Nathan Garnett, general counsel of OfferUp, said the site has methods for proactively identifying suspicious items, but that catching lawbreakers could be challenging. Whether or not we catch it is going to be somewhat dependent on how smart they are. Because one account that posts dozens or hundreds of, say, brand new power tools, we're going to flag that as being pretty suspicious and action that pretty quickly, Mr. Garnett said. But if you only post one or two things, that could be anybody. Kind of curious what the comments say here. Who needs brick and mortars in the Amazon era? Since these flash mobs consist of large numbers of people, it is doubtful there is a strong loyalty to the group from all its members, and a large reward for information identifying others would be effective. Okay, kind of curious to see if that would work. The sad reality, this is a reader pick, illegitimate looting was defended during legitimate protests for fear of upsetting the goal of the protests. True, this was counterproductive for the protesters in that it weakened the goals of the protests. I agree. Due to passively giving cover to the criminal looters and giving the appearance that crime was okay for some people. For some time, we have seen looting and riots were rationalized, and we were told there were root causes to consider. So there has been a growing acceptance of property crimes. Added to that is lack of enforcement by demoralized police and enlightened prosecutors who won't even enforce the more liberal laws in the books now. This is an expected end result. To be clear, it is an attempt to defer blame, to claim that this sort of looting was always an issue. As anyone can see, this type of organized looting is a new occurrence that has arisen from the liberal politics of the day. These are reader picks. And again, this person is from California. These are reader picks in comments on a New York Times article. I'm not reading Breitbart. I'm not reading Fox News. I'm reading the New York Times. And I'm reading the comments section of the New York Times. I don't know what you guys think. It pisses me the fuck off when you see people like Marc Jacobs talk about this in the context of their businesses when they don't have to worry about it the same way that we do. Not only can they afford to rebuild everything, but they can afford to fight the insurance company and then make the insurance company pay the legal fees so that they don't have to pay anything at all. They can afford that drawn-out battle that a smaller business can't. When you rationalize and say it's kind of okay or it's not really that bad or your focus should be over here, the people who are willing to do that, they're not saying, you know what, that's a Marc Jacobs, that's a small business. My morality says I'm only going to steal from Marc Jacobs and not a small business. It winds up affecting everybody. When you allow rationalization of that type of frenzied behavior, again, when you have that type of frenzied behavior, it's not going to stop at Macy's, at Best Buy, at Walmart. It will eventually trickle down to smaller companies. And at the end of the day, the argument that insurance will pay for it is something that aggravates me violently to my core. Because the left side of the political spectrum has some very good criticisms of how insurance is a scam. It has a very good criticisms of how insurance will often screw you, particularly with regard to our healthcare system. And I agree with many of the left's criticisms of insurance as an institution that will often scam you, that will often mislead you, that will often look to screw you at every turn, which is why I was very surprised to see insurance being invoked by so many more left-wing outlets last year. But more importantly, the reason it drives me nuts is because so much of what my business works on cannot be insured. If Somebody steals a clicking hard drive that is in Steve's queue to work on for data recovery. Insurance will never get that back. It doesn't matter the dollar amount that they would compensate me. If they would compensate me, because let's face it, they never will, what matters is that you cannot insure data. You cannot do that. That data that is sitting on that clicking hard drive that's is in Steve's queue that he is going to recover for a customer, that has their baby pictures, their wedding photos, their vacation photos, or whatever else, insurance will never get that back. If that is stolen, that will never be returned. And the idea that theft was said to be okay if it's in the name of this or that, or if it's happening while there's a protest, or, insurance will pay for it, it pissed me off to my core because I had to attach an air horn and a 400-watt air horn and a light to a power supply that I hooked up to a relay that I hooked up to my computer that I used over a remote desktop so that when my neighbor upstairs said, hey, someone's trying to break in, I could hit a button on my phone and have that go off to scare people away. I had to stay up at 1 and 2 and 3 in the morning to do that. And there were people that were saying, yeah, well, it's kind of okay intellectualizing and rationalizing it. And it really did piss me off. I think what pisses me off more than anything else is the idea that, it's okay until it happens to me. It is okay because it's happening to another business, but there's just the fundamental lack of universality of it, which is if it was happening to the person that was rationalizing it or intellectualizing it, they would never say that it's okay. I think that you can be somebody that was happy with the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial, that thought that he should go to prison, that thought that what he did was wrong, that doesn't like police brutality, that doesn't like it when the police don't do their job properly, who simultaneously goes, hey, what are you doing to that small eyeglass shop or that small Korean barbecue? How does that further your cause? Let me know what you think and the thoughts down below, and let me know what you think of Mark Jacobs' comments. Do you think that I am wrong or being hyperbolic when I call him a virtue-signaling cunt, or do you think that that's completely accurate? Obviously, I'm biased, but I'm kind of curious what you all think. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.